I want to talk to you both about the habits of really successful CIOs, and you two have met and spent time with hundreds of them, literally. Gary, what are the top one or two characteristics of the most successful CIOs that you've encountered over your career?
Well, that's an easy question to answer, Bill. And my answer to it is, I guarantee you, the most successful CIOs, if you went out to their offices today, they wouldn't be in them. They'd be out visiting with customers, they'd be out visiting with partners, they'd be out visiting with employees. So travel, not travel per se, but visiting customers, asking them how the company can do a better job serving their needs, listening to that advice, and then taking that advice back to the IT department, back to the boardroom, saying, here's what we need to do to take this company to the next level.
Interesting. Michael?
I would add on to what Gary's saying also with their great communicators, their ability to build team within their organization, be able to go to their line of business peers, get alignment with the initiatives that are trying to be solved on the business side and enable them through the use of technology. I think great communication is absolutely key. The other thing I would add to that, which is essential to any successful executive, is talent management. Building great teams, building great people, developing people, and having them really do just amazing things within your organization. So I would think externally, travel, communication, and talent management.
Consumer advocacy.
Yes.
Well, yeah, and then balancing the right brain, left brain in terms of being creative, yet also, and the word execute Michael was mentioning, be able to take these ideas that they can leverage technology with and put them into neat rows and columns that have an ROI component to it that the business can understand.
Interesting. So we take the flip side of that issue. Is there a characteristic or a trait that you've picked up from time to time in CIOs that are something less than successful? What might that be, Michael?
I think right now the role of the CIO is really the job of saying yes rather than no. And I think right now there are a lot of CIOs that have been used to saying, this is my fiefdom and you will play within the rules that I set. That world has disappeared. So I really think the characteristic of coming up with an IT organization that is able to say yes to whatever is being thrown at them rather than saying, no, you have to play within my sandbox, is something that's essential for success for tomorrow's CIO.
I've seen a piece of data recently from IDG in a research study that was done in Role and Influence that showed a far greater number of people being involved now in the ID decision-making process. I think it went from 11.5 on average to 17 in 1 year.
That's correct.
What does that say about traits and characteristics that you need to deal with this sort of thing? I mean,
Well, you've got to be a great communicator. I mean, that chart you're referencing, I can see it right now. You know, in terms of whether it's determined need at the beginning of the buying process all the way to approve authorized purchase. And we list 7 or 8 different functions that can have an influence in either of those different segments of the buying process, and there's not one box that's empty. So these people, the biggest stumbling block is if they're not great communicators and understanding and getting inside the heads of all these different types of people and what their needs are, to work jointly with them to come up with solutions that work for the company.
So not a lot of room for the insular CIO in the coming years, it sounds like.
No, those days are quickly going away, and especially the technologies like social, cloud, mobile, consumerization of IT. These are all technologies that are forcing CIOs to really say, hey, this is not under my supervision or control for too much longer. How do I best pull the strength of all this together and then moderate it and manage it across the organization essentially?
I mean, to that point also is that we saw this with what we call consumerization of IT, or BYOD, that the first iterations of this, there was a cover story on one of the IDG Enterprise newspapers a couple of weeks ago about 4 CIOs who were early adopters of letting workers come in and put their tablets or smartphones on the company network. So they were ahead there. But then what they saw as this tsunami started to come through the whole company was that it wasn't working that way in terms of they couldn't just let BYOD bring your own device to get the leverage that they needed. They had to change policy right in the middle and say, no, what we're going to do at the company is we're going to buy everybody's device. So your goes out of BYOD. And the reason why was because of they got a better leverage deal with the carrier. I mean, the device itself was not that expensive, but if you can roll up 2,000 people and their bills each month, then the carriers are going to listen.
And so, lastly, if we look at these habits and traits and look at where the role is evolving, Gary, if you to start with here, what skills or skill do you think a CIO ought to be burnishing or focusing on today to get them to where they need to be? Is there a particular skill or a skill set that you think, is it a technical skill, is it a management skill, leadership skill, what is it?
It's all the above, but if I were forced to pick one, I would say these men and women, to continue their careers, they understand technology. Let's assume that. Let's assume they go visit customers. I think they really have to sharpen their pencils and be really smart financial gurus and understand the financial process, because at the end of the day, these men and women are competing with other departments for, last time I checked, budgets are finite. So they need to be able to translate what they want to do with technology into a financial spreadsheet that makes sense, and that's with a CENTS.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to Gary is the whole area of leadership. So if you look at Jim Collins in his talk, in his discussions around good to great, great leaders do three things extremely well. They succeed, they grow, and they provide service, right? So they always give back. And I think the role of the CIO right now is really essential in understanding those three core elements. If you succeed, that's great, but you're always learning, so you're growing, and the organization is growing. And then if you're doing good, then you're also doing well. So are you giving back beyond just what IT is capable of and making the overall business greater than it is by the individual components? So I think that's really where the role of the CIO is evolving towards, in addition to what Gary said.
Gary Beach, Michael Friedenberg, thank you both very much for being my guests here today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
And I'm Bill Laberis from IDG saying thank you very much for joining us here today as well.